welcome. So, I'm going to do the split introduction, split into both rooms at the same time. I'm Philippe Courtin. I'm the co-founder with Steve, the tall blonde, of Agile Vancouver, and the chair for a few more months.
I am the tall blonde guy.
Yeah. We decided to have a little bit bigger than a Monday night meeting by having an afternoon full of very interesting speakers, but we didn't expect that so many would be interested. You know, I was planning with the hotel on 40 people. I said, well, if we reach 50, we're lucky. But guess what? You know, within a week, we had, 80 people signing up, had to manage a waiting list, and finally, since we wanted still the feel of those little 40 people meeting, discussing in a room, we decided to duplicate the meeting. And we've asked our speaker to speak twice. So the same thing is going to happen twice. You can pick in which sequence by picking the room. And actually, I leave it at that. Bye, guys. See you later. Lucky better. Okay, so we decided at the very last minute to ask our speaker to speak twice, so we can have smaller meeting rooms and better dynamics and discussion, question and answer, and having an ocean of people in front of them. But I'm pretty sure you won't miss much by having things not quite in the order in which we had planned it at the beginning. Quite a few people are new to Agile Vancouver. It's a little non-profit organization run by just a bunch of white guys who meet for breakfast once a week. It's nothing very formal. We don't collect membership dues, and we don't keep more than just a mailing list if you want to know about the various events we run. We have an annual conference. We started also very modestly in this hotel 3 years ago, and it's been successful, so we keep doing it. And there'll be another one in November, 3, 4, 5, I think, or 4, 5, 6, I forgot. First week of November. The theme today is lean software development. You know, we were sort of in December, the mood in the economy was sort of depressing, and we thought, what could we do to cheer up our, local folks, and giving up some energy on trying to do things in a leaner way. And many of you have heard Mary Poppendick and Tom, I always forget Tom, Mary and Tom Poppendick, whom we brought to Vancouver a couple of times already, but Mary and Tom are busy traveling the world, and I asked Mary, hey, give me a few names, we need, fresh faces in Vancouver. Not that we don't like you, Mary, she'll actually come again in November, probably. Yeah, it's nice to get other ideas. So she introduced me to Katherine Radeka, who happens to live not too far. She'll tell you she's in Portland, actually, she's lying. She lives in the other Vancouver, the little one there.
Oh, yeah.
The imitation one, yeah. So this afternoon there are 3 talks. We'll sort of respect the schedule, turn your cell phones off, there will be coffee outside. Starting at 6 o'clock, we'll have a social mingling, whatever. There'll be food and drinks, also just outside in the foyer there. For those of you who want to know more about Agile Vancouver, just go to the website, agilevancouver.ca, put your name on the mailing list. I manage the mailing list, it's low volume, well protected from spam, so you don't risk too much, and you can always bail out whenever you want. Any question, anything I'm forgetting? No? Okay. Well, is Katherine Radeka.
So the first thing I first want to check, we need, everyone in this room, you're going to need one of these and one of these. So if you don't have that, please go ahead and just come up to the front. I've got a few more up here. Okay. A little bit, right here. Okay, one of those I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm very happy to be here because I started out as a software engineer. I have a kind of an unusual background, although maybe not for software, as I learned this morning. I have an undergraduate degree in chemistry with a minor in physics. But I worked my way through college writing code to help a construction company automate their bidding and proposal process. And when I got out of school, I learned that that was a lot more lucrative than serving as a bench chemist. So that's where the direction that my career went. I served a stint at Intel before finally settling at Hewlett-Packard. And I was involved in Hewlett-Packard in their e-services initiatives. I don't know if you guys remember that. Those of us who were at HP remember that very well. Because Carly Fiorina was going out and giving all these talks about these things called e-services, and none of us knew what she meant. I was assigned to one of those.
Where is that?
Apparently they didn't either. One of the garage, what they called the garage programs to help figure out what e-services were, and we quickly discovered that traditional methods of software, as it had been practiced at HP, the tools that they had used to develop their enterprise class tools did not apply in this funky world called e-services where nobody understood what they were anyway, right? So I quickly became an aficionado of Agile software development. It was not called that back then. This is before the Agile Manifesto. We called it evolutionary delivery. And I became a coach helping other e-services teams inside HP implement this life cycle. Now in 2002, I presented a paper about this at UPSLA when it was in Seattle, and I can actually say that in this room, and some of you will know what I mean, unlike most of my audiences. And there I met Mary Poppendike. When I met Mary, a lot of light bulbs went on for me. It was like, okay, this is why we do Agile. This is why it works. At a system level, when you look at the 10,000-foot level of what we're trying to accomplish in product development, this is why Agile works. And I hope today to give you just a little bit of a flavor of that. Now what happened for me at HP is that I got hooked up with a person who was thinking along similar lines on the hardware side of the business, and he and I got together. And we ended up using lean product development techniques inside one of HP's printer divisions on hardware programs. And since I left HP in 2005, that's primarily where my focus has been, either on programs or products that are integrated bundles of hardware software, or on products that have no software at all, like baby diapers. Lean baby diapers is very important at her. And like I said, I'm very excited to be here because I get to talk to software people very often because I'm mostly out talking to those other people, people who are out there making the hardware that you guys have to connect to. So I'm going to talk today, the focus of my talk is going to be lean product development. I'm going to talk about how waste and value apply in space, and what that means for you as software. Okay? So I'm going to assume that given that you all are here and this is Agile, that you all probably know the software world a lot better than I do at this point. But I'm going to talk to you about what's going on in the lean world and where, when we put our lean lens on, how that changes things like product development. All right? So in terms of logistics, you have these handouts, and I'm going to talk about them in this order. And pretty much all of the main content that I'm going to give you today is in one of these three articles. And I think that I like doing that. I think it's a better way for you to help remember what I say when you get home. So you don't have to read these now. What I will do is I will say, you might want to check out the diagram on page 14 of this article when I get there, because the slides, the diagrams that I use largely come from these places. You also have this. And if you could take away anything from today, I would like you to take away this. So when we get to the end of the presentation, I'll talk about this and why this is so important for everybody who is trying to put on that lean lens, trying to be lean. Please interrupt me with questions as we go. I have heard that you guys are not shy, so I'm going to be expecting a lot of interruptions starting with the next slide. And we are small enough, since they split it, that we can run this in much more of a discussion kind of way. So I have a certain amount of content. I can talk about this all day, but I would prefer that we interact and have a lot of questions. And so, please feel free to do that. The main things that I would like you to learn from my talk today is this is lean. Lean is maximizing value minus waste. And when we do that, when we maximize value minus waste in anything that we do, it helps us get better, faster, and cheaper at the same time. It helps us transcend the trade-offs that we all learned, Project Management 101. You have to trade off scope, schedule, and resources. Sometimes you have to trade off quality, schedule, and resources. Well, Lean shows us how to transcend that trade-off. That's why it works. That's why it's so powerful, and that's why I've been able to use it in so many different contexts. Because the focusing on learning about value, maximizing it, and then eliminating everything else speeds up everything, lowers cost everywhere. We're going to talk about lean product development, and we're going to talk about why lean product development does not equal lean manufacturing. Okay? And I'll start out, I'll just preface that with this comment. Lean, the word lean, came from a research program to try to understand why Toyota was so much better than its competitors on so many different dimensions. And so what we think of today as lean manufacturing comes from the Toyota production system. Now the Toyota production system and the Toyota product development system evolved side by side, and they support each other, but they're not the same. They have some key differences that are very important for you guys who are doing software, because you guys do things that are a little bit of both. And we're going to talk about that. There are many different things out there that call themselves lean. In fact, today, unlike in 2002, there are many things out there that call themselves lean software development. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. They all have the same goal, but there are different ways to get there. And then I'm going to talk about Lambda and why Lambda is the foundation for everything. All right? So, these are some definitions that you may have heard about lean and what lean is. What other ones have you heard? Yes?
Isn't it way similar to the just-in-time concept introduced in the manufacturing industry?
Yeah. So just-in-time is part of the system of manufacturing practices. And so yes, just-in-time and lean have a very strong connection. What else have you heard? If someone was to throw lean out at your company, what would that mean? Go ahead.
Development.
Development? Okay. Okay.
It's often connected with Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma.
Okay.
And they're sometimes then connected with accessible metrics and analysis and that sort of a thing.
Okay. So he said that it's related to Six Sigma. And Six Sigma is, again, it comes out of the same roots. And there's this thing called Lean Six Sigma that tries to combine the two. And again, it mostly plays down in the manufacturing space. You got something back there?
Faster releases and being in market quicker.
Being faster and getting to market quicker, okay? Probably without specifying how, right? You just got to be leaner somehow. A lot of times, too, unfortunately, it gets associated with things like downsizing and layoffs, budget cuts. And that's the biggest thing I face a lot of times when I go into companies is I'll put the slide up and I'll say, what does lean mean to you? This is, well, lean means cutting things down to the bone and not really again, without providing how. How do you do that? Now, it is true that lean helps you run a lot more efficiently, but it does that by, it has some very prescribed ways for how you run more effectively that make it possible for you to reduce your budgets, but without killing everybody in the process. So this is my definition of lean. This is the one that for me has been the most meaningful as I've looked at this. And there's a few, I'm not going to read it, but there's a few key elements of this that I want to point out to you. It's continuously increasing customer value. Continuously increasing. Toyota is known for their relentless pursuit of perfection. I was listening to a speaker there a few years ago, and I never forget what he said. He said, Toyota's ideal is that one day you will walk out of your driveway and the car that you want materializes. There is no supply chain, there's no dealer, there's no sales rep to negotiate with, there's no product development, there's no manufacturing plant. It's just there. Okay? Now, of course, that's an impossible goal. But having that vision in mind, I encourages people to not rest on their laurels, to continuously get better. And they have done that. When we first began studying Toyota's product development process, they were 18 months faster than their competitors. And it would have been very easy for them to say, you know what, we're good enough. We don't need to keep pushing the envelope. And they kept, in the next 5 years, as we kept studying them, they cut another 6 months off their product development. Unbelievable. You know, really, if you outside looking in, you don't have an understanding of how they're doing it. And a lot of it comes back to continuously increasing value, believing that that is possible, an important goal to pursue. Now, if you're going to do this, you've got to first of all understand what value means. And we're going to do that in a minute. I'm going to ask you to think about what value means for you. All right? And this is specifically value as your customers perceive value. One of the fundamental ideas behind Lean is that if we don't deliver customer value over time, we will not be able to deliver business value. If we want, you know, we can't get shareholder returns without revenue, all right? So we have to focus here. We increase the effectiveness of the things we do that create value, and then we eliminate everything else. And we summarize that like this. Maximize value minus waste for the entire system. Now, I say for the entire system, and this is especially relevant in product development, because we do things in product development all the time that are wasteful. Now, who in here has frequent integration? Very frequent integration. Okay. So if you take frequent integration and you take your average Six Sigma or lean manufacturing person and you show them a frequent integration process, they'll look at that and they'll say, why are you doing all those integrations? It's wasteful. You don't need to do all those. But why do we do frequent integration? Those of you who are doing it. What do you get?
Avoid a bigger pileup at the end.
Yeah, you avoid a bigger pileup at the end.
Pain along the way, so starting out all at once, and hopefully take less time.
You pay a little bit along the way, right? And specifically what you do is you keep defects from propagating, because you catch them right away, okay? So when I'm talking to lean manufacturing people about things like daily integration, there's this concept in lean manufacturing called the andon cord, where if somebody notices a defect, they can stop the line. Well, that's our opportunity to stop the line. You know, we have this integration, and things pop up, we address it right away. We don't let the defects propagate, all right? But that's just one example of the things that we do that on the surface can look wasteful, but they decrease waste across the entire system. So, Lean gets you better, faster, cheaper, and it does that by helping you transcend these trade-offs. Okay? So, for example, this is kind of an extreme example. I was working with a company, a medical device company, that had video for their checkpoints. This is professionally produced video for the checkpoint meetings that they held with their senior executives to convince them to release funding for the next phase of the product. Nobody outside the company ever saw this, and it took them weeks. Right? So if we can help them, help the senior executives get past their need for that, which is mostly what that consulting project is about, you know, we've freed up weeks of time that's not reflected in our traditional understanding of these trade-offs. Right? If we do something like we switch to a smaller cycle of development so that we're paying our pain a little bit along the way, we're freeing up space and time that help free up these things. And so far in, now, 7 years of doing this, I haven't yet found a situation where focusing on value did not help us transcend these trade-offs. Sometimes in ways that people didn't expect. So when you're talking to people about why you're doing it, when you're talking to people about why you're doing Agile, that's one way to talk about it that's helpful. Is to say, well, why are we doing Lean or why are we doing Agile? Because it helps us transcend our trade-offs that we normally have about time versus quality, or about feature versus schedule, that we usually use to make decisions about what we can do and we can't do. And Lean says, no, Lean says if you really think about what's leading to value, you'll be able to transcend this. You'll be able to get better. So, this is a customer's value stream. A value stream is the way that value flows. So you can imagine they picked up the printer at an electronics store and they brought it home. And this is all the things that have to happen before they can use it to do something important to them. Where's the waste?
The goal is to share, so all.
Okay, all right. Goal is to share. This picture suggests a few different things to me. What might it suggest to you as a product developer? Yeah. So anything that we do to reduce setup time, reduce the number of times I have to add ink, reduce the amount of time we have to add paper, is going to automatically increase the value of this product to my customer. Now, whether they'll pay for that value is another question. But if we're looking to increase value, if we're looking to create a more competitive product, these are some rich places to look. Okay? I actually used this diagram with HP because at the time, it took us more than an hour for someone to bring home one line of our printers, one of our printer lines, and set it up and get their first printout. And we had a more than 100% call rate, which meant that if you bought this printer, you were guaranteed to call us. It was, in fact, you were probably going to have to call us more than once at some point during this process. All right? And this picture makes that problem very stark. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to do something really quick to kind of get us into value space. Okay? So I'd like you to take a minute. I'd like you to jot down 3 things that you think constitute value for your current customer. If you're internal, you can use, like if you're in an IT organization, you can use an internal customer. If you have a product, I'd like you to think of it in terms of your external customer, but I'd like you to do that for 2 different levels. I'd like you to do that for your end user. Now, when we were talking about end users of printers at HP, we always used grandma. We couldn't use our own grandmas, because by the time we'd gotten done with them, they already knew more about printing than we did. But we would use, the random person's grandma. What would they be able to do? That was our prototypical end user. And then an intermediate customer. Now, the intermediate customer for HP, for a printer, was Best Buy or Circuit City or Office Depot, the places that we had to convince to carry our products and to display them prominently. That was who our main intermediate customer are. And you probably have others. They may be the person who's deciding whether or not to use your product. It could be the person who's deciding whether or not to fund your product if it's an internal product as opposed to an external product. And then if there may be some people here are students or something like that, if that's the case, you can pretend to be the chief engineer for the iPhone. That'll lead to some interesting discussion. Okay, so think about who who your end user is for an iPhone and who your intermediate customer is for an iPhone and what value might constitute for them. All right? And then I'd like you to find a partner and just talk about it. We'll take just a few minutes to do this. I'll give you some warning. Just a few. Someone be willing to volunteer what you came up with. Sure.
I thought about the iPhone a little bit. Never used one, but this is from what I understand. So for the end users, maximizing the battery life is important. Maximizing the resolution of the screen, and maximizing the power of the reception, given it's a phone. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
For the intermediate customer, I thought about the sales reps, the salespeople in the shops, whatever. The thing tends to feel good in the hand, so it's pretty easy to get people engaged emotionally straight away is one thing for them. It also gets up and running quickly, which is good for demoing a product when you're actually in the store. And there's a ton of complementary products available as well, which is going to reassure customers that they're going to be able to accessorize.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Someone else. Maybe we'll just do one more. Yes, go ahead.
I'm looking at it from a banking background.
Okay.
End users, especially if you're doing banking, online banking, the simplicity, the ease of use, the time it takes to do things, and also the reliability. It's there when you need it. It works whenever you want it. Intermediate, we're looking at the business within the bank, the folks who decide whether or not a certain product will reach it to the end user. So the features and the time to market, how quickly can you develop it, and thirdly the cost efficiency in getting this product out.
Okay, so with your end users and your intermediate customers, what are some of the trade-offs that you have to think about when you're trying to balance the needs of one versus the other?
It's the cost and the schedule.
Cost and schedule versus things like simplicity and ease of use. Yeah, yeah. That's, yes.
I have a question. Say you have a cell phone that shows a battery life of 6 days, which is quite reasonable. Say we're adding value if we increase that to 9 days.
You increase the battery life to 9 days?
Yes.
What do you guys think? I mean, how many people have cell phone would that add value for you?
For the customer, yeah, for the user, yeah.
You're adding value, you're not necessarily adding value to pay for it.
Yeah. So that is always the question is, will they pay for it, right? How important is it relative to other things? Well, all right. Still, so where this is helpful is when we're thinking about lean product designs, right? We have an opportunity to increase battery life from 6 days to 9 days. Does it really increase cost? We probably do it, right?
But is it solving any real problem?
Yeah, that is the question. Because
Well-
everybody hooks up their phone every night anyway.
Exactly.
I'm
I
notoriously
certainly
bad
don't.
at that. Well,
I'm charging my phone right now.
so will they pay? That's always the question you have to ask is will they pay for it? I totally agree with that. But also at the same time, I have worked with clients for whom this was very difficult, and for whom taking the time to think through this helped them make better product decisions. And I think that this is something that's important for everybody. And it also is important because it helps us recognize what waste looks like. So if somebody came to you and they said, we need to cut cost out of this product, and the only way to do it is to reduce battery life from 6 days to 1 day. What does that do to your customer value? Yeah, exactly.
They would say 3 days.
3 days is okay.
Wouldn't that all depend on the market survey, what the customers really want?
Yeah, so eventually, and we'll talk about this in just a couple of slides. We're guessing. I mean, you may be basing some of the stuff that you've done here on data, but you're probably, just going off your own impressions. And your instincts are probably good, but we do have a set of things in the lean world around things like voice of the customer to help get at what value really means. And that stuff, even though to some of the bean counters it looks really wasteful, is never wasteful, all right? And so, because, well, eventually what we want is in some of the more sophisticated people that are using lean product development actually make trade-off curves around things like that, or demand curves. Okay, if it's 1 day, what does that do to demand? If it's 2 days, if it's 3 days, you know, where's the point at which people say, "Nyeh." Exactly, exactly. So yeah, eventually the companies get to a point where that's what they're doing with it. Okay. Now, another little discussion exercise here. Where is the waste in this?
Most of it.
A lot of those for status reports.
Well, it depends on how many product roadmaps you do. I've done 4 in the last 3 months with the same product. I mean, it's over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And, you know, some of this stuff, that's really.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the content. I mean, the checkpoint meeting can be available. You can learn something else.
Right, right.
Depends on who the customer is.
Say more about that. Depends on who the customer is.
So if you're the C-level executive, some of those things are actually pretty valuable to you, to know that your investments are going well or whatever. If you're the end user of that product, you care less about checkpoint meetings.
Okay. Now, the standard that we use when we're looking at this and we're figuring out what waste is exactly what you said. Will the customer pay for this? Will the customer know whether or not this ever happened? Okay? So I'm going to suggest to you that there are actually 3 things on this list. There are activities that directly create value. We want to spend most of our time on those. There are activities that create no value. It's really clear. You know, less of this we spend on this, the better. And there are things on here that we call necessary waste. The customer won't pay for them, but we're going to have a really hard time getting the product done if we don't do them. And I'll talk to you about those 3 different categories of things. All right? So, here's the value.
Why does the customer care about design experiments?
Why does the customer care about design experiments? Any ideas?
Because you're going to build a product on it.
Yeah.
It's not the customer's problem.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
It gives you your product options so they can pick the one they like.
Yeah. Okay.
You find the problems early on, so you don't design the whole thing and then figure out its crap.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. We do design experiments because they increase the quality of the design, and that's why it's out.
Some of this should depend on what industry you're in too. If you're in a regulated industry, specifications are absolutely necessary.
If you're in a regulated industry, specifications are necessary.
Regulators become one of your customers.
Right.
Regulators
So
become one of
I
your
guess
customers.
some of this depends on
Specifications are necessary.
what industry you're in, I suppose. In fact, in
Inside
some
your
cases,
work.
that's your deliverable is the spec.
Okay, okay. So, and I have worked with a defense contractor, and for somebody like that, I absolutely agree, because they're the customer, they're paying for the spec.
Yeah.
We can argue about whether or not they should be,
Or the
whether or not this is a good use of our
regulator
taxpayer dollars.
needs to see it to approve it before you can sell, so it's important there too. And I agree, it could be wasteful, but if your world says you have to do it, you have to do it.
Yeah. On the other hand, I work with some medical device companies that have been helpful that are working to help get the regulators to understand this picture too. That, you know, what they want, it's not the specification that they want in that case, it's the assurance that the product is going to be safe and effective. And how else can we give that without delivering a specification that's not going to be worth the paper it's written on when it's done, right? So, yeah.
Packaging design, why is it that way?
So why is the packaging design, and I'll come back to you in a second, why might packaging design be considered waste?
Well, you might not even need packaging design, depending on how you deliver the product.
Yeah. That's because packaging is waste.
But packaging can lead to the installation.
Packaging.
If you could, would you?
Oh, yeah, but I might, but if you take 10,000 people and put, a bunch of food in a box in front of them, or something all tricked out with fancy plastic boxes, which was really good stuff. So, there's questions of this.
No, it's waste, like if you're shipping eggs out, you need to package it. Otherwise you won't make it.
I think the key is that you try to minimize waste, not eliminate it.
Right.
And so if your goal is to minimize the packaging, that can be very effective.
Sure. I think it depends on your product as well, and what kind of value you're delivering. If you were going to urban fare, for example, packaging is critical because people are paying for the aesthetics and the object that you're actually acquiring. So I think it all depends on the product and value.
Yeah, and actually, I showed this slide once at a company that makes cosmetics and perfumes. And perfume is all about the packaging. Right? Okay. Right? Okay. You had something.
I was just thinking of design experiments and test results, and I always think that when you walk into IKEA, for instance, they have those robotic things that simulate how a certain product will be used. You know, the opening and shutting of kitchen drawers. So I always wonder that really does add value, or at least, does, as a customer, you feel that, okay, if this is how the product gets tested, then surely it must be a very good product, and increases confidence. So where would you not consider that as a value?
I would consider that, which is why the test results, the difference between the test procedures and the test results, this is documentation, and this is data. Okay? In fact, this is the way that I think of value in product development. Anything that we do to learn more about our customers, right? The things that we need to do to take that customer knowledge and turn it into a feature or a requirement. I'm using requirement specifically, not specification, but a requirement, which could be a user story, or could be a concept drawing or something, all right? Anything we do that increases our knowledge about our technical and process capabilities, right? And then the things that we need to do to translate that into product. That's the core of value in product development. Yes?
I'm just wondering, is any of this online? So
it's actually, that exact list is in this article here, okay? Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's value, what is waste?
Waste is waste would be anything that you can remove without changing the value. So if packaging is required, so you can ship your product, otherwise it's not never going to make it to your customer. It has value, you have to have it.
Okay, so, that would be what I would, in the lean definition of value and waste, packaging is waste. And packaging is waste because it does not directly deliver customer value. And if you can, I would call it necessary waste though, because you have to have it, like eggs, somebody said eggs, well of course you have to have a package for eggs, or they never make it to market, right? Yeah, yes, go ahead.
That seems like a bit of a fudge, this term necessary waste. And I mean, if the customer is the people in marketing who care about packaging and the information on it, and the people that are running the shop or whatever that want it to be really clear on the packaging, what the product is and so on, then it's necessary. And calling it necessary waste, I mean, in terms of, if you're looking in terms of the end user who doesn't care so much about the packaging, then fine, it could be necessary waste. But it seems to just not take into account that there are other stakeholders, there are other customers, like the marketing department or whatever, for whom it's not waste at all. So calling it necessary waste just seems a bit of a fudge.
You bring up a very good point, which is why when I had to do the value, I had to look at intermediate customers and end users. Because you're right, an attractive package, especially an attractive bulk pack, like would go on a shelf of a store, is complete waste for the end user, but it's probably not waste for the store. And really, they're the ones buying. In fact, a lot of times, for products that go through distribution channels, it's the distributors as much as anybody else you're designing the product for. Yes?
I would even argue the status report is not as a waste because, I think it's important. I mean, of course, you don't want to get too many details into it, but getting the right information to your managers or superior at the right time will otherwise, the project can drag on for many number of years or spend over budget, because it kind of give you frequent feedback kind of update to the executives that they know that the project is on track. right? So that brings value to the customer because that decides the value of the project.
Okay, so what he's arguing is that the status report is not truly waste, because if you couldn't do it, then you wouldn't actually get the product out, right? If you had no way of tracking your progress, right? And I will tell you that that's almost the definition of what we call necessary waste, because the customer doesn't care how we do it. It has no, I mean, if it's done well, the customer will get the product out. I mean, let me start over with that sentence, that didn't make no sense. If we manage the project well, we'll get a good product. But I have seen many, many projects managed poorly that also got a good product out. Took longer, it was more painful, required a little more overtime, perhaps. But, you know, and so we call that necessary waste, yeah.
Good example of that is all the game companies.
Excuse me?
All the game development
The game development companies?
But they get the games out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes?
What if you could deliver value in small increments? This is kind of a leading question, most people know what the answer is. If you could deliver value in small increments.
We have visual controls. If you're using one of the agile methodologies where you've got a visual table of your work and you're standing in front of that table every day, then you're using a visual control. All right? We have these things called A3 reports. You know, these are, you know, this is all mostly lean jargony stuff. But the concept to take away from this picture is that when you're in software land, you're over here. Okay? So, the worst thing that someone can do, and if someone tries to do this to you, you are free to call me, and I will call them for you, is 5S. 5S is a lean manufacturing technique. There are 5 S's. I have trouble, I'm so bad that I hate it so much I have trouble remembering them. But it's like sort, shine, assign a home, systematize, and sustain. Oh, I did get it right. I have seen this used where they actually take tape and draw tape and say, here's where your stapler goes. Okay. Now think about some of the most brilliant people in your company, and think about what their desks look like, and think about how successful that would be. Right? So. Yeah. Now there are people, also very brilliant software developer people, for whom that's very natural, and that's okay. They can have their little tape and they can have their little stapler. They're not getting anywhere near my desk. Okay. Kanbans are interesting because that's something I'm very interested to watch the presentation this afternoon. I'm going to be in this Scrumban presentation because I'm very interested to see what it does with this. Because I've seen a couple of groups try it and have it not work very well. A Kanban, just so that you know, is a way to get continuous flow in a process by using a token. So that a downstream process gives a token, this Kanban, they call it in Japanese, to an upstream processor to say, okay, you can make more of this. And so the way they use that in a manufacturing plant is they might have, say, 10 engine assemblies. And when they get down to 1 engine assembly, they'll give the Kanban to the engine assembly line, and they'll say, okay, we need 10 more of these. And they'll make 10. By the time they make 10, they're ready. And so they use it to create that flow. So I'm going to be very curious to hear about this, because if it works, that's that. I may have to change that slide. But in general, what I would say is that if you've got, especially if you've got people in your company, if lean is getting to be a really hot thing at your company, and they start talking about wanting to do it in product development, I don't care if you work with me, but try to find someone that you can work with who has experience in product development and who understands this picture. It'll make your life a lot easier. Okay. And kind of like the last major topic area, and this is something that I cover in this article here, the What is Lean About Product Development. In fact, these next 2 pictures are on page 13 of that, is that if you Google lean product development, you're going to get a picture that looks like this. There are a lot of people writing about what we call the Toyota product development system. Now, I said earlier in my introduction, lean comes from research into primarily Toyota's practices because back in the 80s, Toyota was beating the crap out of GM and Chrysler and Ford, kind of like they're doing now. You'd think they would have learned, but and we wanted to find out what was going on. So Honda was another one. Honda has been a lot more closed about their process, but Toyota has been very generous about letting researchers in. So when you hear lean, like when you hear lean supply chain, or you hear lean manufacturing, or lean management, or any of the other many things that have lean in front of them, really what they're talking about is what's going on inside Toyota. Okay? And there's been a lot of research into the Toyota product development system. There's another group of people that have said, okay, we've got this wonderful thing called lean manufacturing. What can we learn about how to integrate our products into lean manufacturing? Well, that's not going to apply to you guys so much. But so you might see some stuff called design for lean, and that's what that is. How do we make a product that's going to be that we can manufacture in a lean way? There's another group out here that looks at things like Kanbans and 5S and continuous flow and value stream maps are one of my favorite. And they call this, I call that the lean toolbox, because what they're doing is they're taking the toolkit from other areas of lean, like manufacturing, and they're trying to apply it in product development. And I hope that I've convinced you that that's not a very good place to go. In fact, value stream mapping, that's another thing. If you're not doing Agile, and someone says that you need to value stream map your process, you can have a comment, because what I'm going to tell them is no, you should be doing Agile. You can optimize a traditional product development process all you want, which is all value stream mapping is going to do, and you'll never get the results that you'll get by moving to Agile. Won't come close. And then there's this group down here called Lean Principles, and I'm going to spend most of my time down there. So Mary, whom I know that you guys have talked with, I would put her very squarely in this camp. Because what Mary has done that I love so much about her is that she has deeply thought about, deeply thought about what product development, about what lean means in product development, about what value means in product development, what waste means in product development. And she has created a picture of lean software development that looks nothing like anything inside Toyota. Toyota does software, but they do very little of it, all right? But it's very much in alignment with the philosophy behind lean. It is as if someone said this to her once, this is the way Toyota would do software if they did software, okay? So I'm a very big fan of Mary. I love her, and she's awesome. And this is why, because she's done that deep thinking. She uses some things up here, and she actually picks from everything, but this is really where she sits. David Anderson, who's another person that I know you guys have heard from, and is a comrade of the guy who's doing the Scrum-on system, is kind of in here. Because I believe that what he's done is that he's thought about the lean concept of Kanbans from this principle, from the perspective of the principle, as opposed to the perspective of the thing. Because remember when I said that I had run into some companies that had had some problems with that, I think it's because they were way over here. They were trying to apply it in a manufacturing way, instead of doing as David has done, which is really think about, okay, what do you do with the Kanban, and what does it mean for the software perspective? And then you might run into some things that are called relabeled lean. There is most famous is there's this guy in product development named Robert Cooper. He's the inventor of phase gate of life cycles. So if you're using phase gate, you can thank Robert Cooper for that. He started calling his work lean stage gate. There's nothing lean about it. You read the stage gate stuff he wrote 10 years ago, and you read the stuff he's doing now. There's nothing lean about it. So we call that relabeled lean. What I would suggest to you as a path forward is to, if you haven't read Mary's books, that's where to start. Okay. If you get to where you feel like you've extracted everything from Mary, then you might want to start branching out a little bit. But really for software, she's the best. If you have hardware partners, they may benefit from learning about this design for lean stuff, which is a lot about how to get quality in hardware. And then, spend some time thinking about the Toyota product development system and how some of those things might apply to you. So I told you that I would finish with this card. one thing the lean world has in common across the entire disciplines, this entire picture that I showed you. Lambda stands for look, ask, model, discuss, and act. And it's the cycle of continuous improvement. So remember, going back to my original definition, lean is about continually increasing customer value. And this is the process for doing that. So if you could take one thing from my talk and go back to your work tomorrow and try it out, this is what I'd like you to try. Find something in your span of control, something in your area. Go out and take a good look at it. Get up close and personal with it. And then start asking. Start asking why. Why is this happening? And start asking, who might know something about this? Who can I talk to about this? Start building some models around it. We have a lot of models that we can use in software. And then take the time to discuss it with people, which is the one I usually have to work with on engineers, and sometimes we don't like to talk to people. And then go out and take action. And then look again. What happened? What did I see? Was that what I expected? What do I want to do from here? When you ask Toyota what they do, they don't call it lean. They say, we do this. We do PDCA, or we do Lambda, depending on where they are in the company. All right? So that's the place to start. I have a couple minutes, I think, for questions. Yes?
It seems to me that going lean requires a huge change in trust in a lot of companies, management to employees, employees within teams, and teams to teams across functions. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It does. I will totally agree with you. What I like about Lambda is that you can do Lambda, you don't have to tell anybody you're doing it. So I can always make myself more lean. I can always get better at, I can always understand who my customers are and deliver more value to them. I can always eliminate the waste of my own processes, right? But it is true that to really make this organizational wide, it does require a lot more trust. Yes?
Are there any drawbacks, any side effects to going lean?
Side effects?
Yes.
Okay, that's a really good question. There is one side effect. The accounting systems that we have punish you for going lean, and you have to be careful about that, all right? And what I mean by that is that if you take lean on the manufacturing side, it's a lot about eliminating inventory. And an inventory, the way that we measure inventory, it's an asset, and so you actually look like you're hurting yourself even though you're not. So that's one side effect. Another side effect is actually gets back to your point, which is that when you start doing this, people start acting like they should be empowered. And if the managers are not walking the talk, it can create a lot of conflict. I think I'm at time, so thank you very much. You've been a great